Thank you so much, Jani, for your speech and introduction, especially about the kind of culture theme that culture industry where we're working, and the fact that we want everyone to be able to be themselves and really be open about our feelings regarding everything that's going on right now. So thank you. Lovely to see you all. My name is Alicia Hassan, and I'm the head of industry at Finnish Film Affair. Just in case you haven't heard about Finnish Film Affair, it is the industry-facing event of Helsinki International Film Festival, which also has another kind of nickname called Love and Anarchy, Rakkautta ja Anarkiaa. And it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about disruption and art. So with me, I have Diego Vasquez Lozano. It's been a pleasure to meet you a few weeks back.
Same, thank you.
And talk about, well, we have quite a few things in common actually, but we'll get to that. Just to kind of introduce Diego here, you have over 25 years of experience in filmmaking. And I must say, you have to share your night cream routine, because the math just doesn't add up. 25 plus years, okay, we'll get back to that. And you're so accomplished. Like you've had a company since a very young age. You have a company in the UK, in London, and also Mexico. And now, drum roll.
Finland.
Yeah. So, deserves a round of applause.
Thank you very much for having me here. Kiitos kutsusta. Okay, so I'll start with my story as brief as I can, because there's some more stuff to talk about. But so the reason my face doesn't match my years of work experience is it's because I actually started working when I was 14 years old, and I think if there's some artists in the room, maybe they can relate. But it all started when, since I have memory, I always wanted to be a musician for films. Like my dream, since I have memory, was to make music for films. And my mom in Mexico was very discouraging of this. She always discouraged me and said, like, no, you will not be a musician, because musicians starve to death. And she was very discouraging, and she literally repeatedly told me to give it up, and that no one would hire me to make music for their films. So then my strategy from a very early age was, why don't I become good at making films so that I can hire myself as a musician for the films? And that's kind of where my journey started. So due to like some turbulent divorce between my parents and custody fights, and the way a judge put it was that my parents were behaving like teenagers, and he suggested to start my life. So I actually started my professional career at 14. I started working at a sound studio where we were cutting sound for TV and for radio, and very quickly got interested in animation. And by the time I was 18, I was already 4 years working in the industry. I was living by myself, paying my own rent, and sort of following my career. When I was 18, I actually moved. I saved up some money I had a small salary, but I was able to save up. I didn't have any children, now I do. But I was able to save up and move to London. And then when I moved to London, I worked on films like Troy. I was focused by then on visual effects and post-production, animation. I also had some on-set experience. If you guys watch the movie Troy, for instance, I have one credit as a production assistant on the film shoot and also as a visual effects artist on the post-production. So that gave me an insight into both sides of filmmaking. And as you know, I know that this is not about film specifically, but the one thing that attracted me from film as an artist is because I like all arts. I like literature, I like music, like I mentioned before. And one thing that I noticed in working on big films like Troy, what really amused me about the film industry is that films create jobs for all artists. Like, they call it the 7 arts, but it's not just the arts. Like, films can hire historians. Like, for instance, in Troy is a good example, because there was historians, there was military advisors, there were accountants, finance people, musicians, orchestra musicians, composers, visual effects artists, illustrators, sculptors, like all trades possible in art, and not only in art, are hireable jobs on film. So that really quickly attracted me as a sort of safety net for my dreams. So again, I'm in London, I'm 18, I'm working full-time job in big post-production companies like MPC. I don't know if you guys relate, but big companies that made visual effects for award-winning movies, TV series, advertising and music videos, art installations. So I quickly built my career. I worked as a full-time employee for like a good 7 years in a really good company that my old boss, I really owe him a lot, because he gave me the opportunity to try different things. And my approach was to, while I had a full-time job, when I was 23, I wanted to make my first feature film. And I saved up again. I didn't take any holiday time for like a few years. And then I asked my boss if I could take like all the days that I hadn't taken in holiday all in a row. And I took like 70 days of holiday. And with the money I had saved, I invested in my first feature film. It's pretty bad. I would be embarrassed to show it, but that was my film school. Because I didn't finish high school, I couldn't really apply to film school, so I just had to learn in the professional environment. But I must say, it's the best way to learn, working. Even if you do study and you're an academic person, there's no better way to learn your craft than working on it. So long story short, eventually after working full-time in these companies, I built really strong relationships with a bunch of clients around the world. And in 2012, I was ready to found my own company. So I founded my own company, Detachment East, in London in 2012. We kind of hit the ground running because I already had clients. But the interesting thing about this company is that from the very beginning, I didn't want to just do a services company. Like, from the very beginning, I wanted to provide services to the industry, make some profits, and use the profits all the time, all of them, to invest in my own intellectual property, or rather, I should say, my own artistic work. So I started hiring writers and illustrators and artists, and my dream from the very get-go, it was very, very specific. From day one, I was like, I want to create full-time, stable jobs for artists. And if you see if you trace the history of the company, the workforce is always 95% artists and maybe 5% management. And most management people that work in the company are artists themselves. A good example is I have 41 employees right now, and I would say that 90% of them are musicians. And that was pure coincidence. I think we just got along, or maybe a lot of musicians tend to also get interested in other art forms.
So are they musicians who are also working on the different production roles?
Yes, absolutely. Like, for instance, I have 3D animators, screenwriters, directors, just creative directors, or 3D modelers, sculptors, illustrators, but they all, our sort of overlap is always music. So a day in the studio, for instance, we would just like finish lunch. We have lunch at the studio every day. I always impose that from day one. That creates culture, it creates community and a sense of connection. So after lunch, in any given day, while we digest the food, we would go to our music room. We have a wonderful music room with a piano, like grand piano, small piano, guitars, basses. I'm now learning Hindu tabla and my gamakas. And we just jam. We just jam. And now one thing that sort of connected me to Finland through that was obviously through all the contacts that I made, eventually that all my investment in IP led into my relationship with Finland, which is very, very random. I have a Swedish friend who maybe you've heard, but there's a company in Sweden that's literally the best visual effects company in the world right now. It's called Important Looking Pirates, for those who maybe seen them. And they, my friend Jafe, who I used to work with in London, owns that company. And Mikko Kodisoja, who actually is one of the founders of Supercell here in Finland, approached Jafe something like, hey, I've abandoned video games. I want to move into film. And do you have any intellectual property? And he was like, we've been so busy doing the best visual effects services that we do not have any intellectual property. But I have this Mexican crazy friend that has a bunch of intellectual property. So Mikko and I met, and it was like love at first sight, because we had a lot of value to bring, not just to his vision, but also to Finland and the culture sector in Finland, as well as he bringing value to us, not just as an investor, but also as having experience in seeing intellectual property see the day of light. So then that's when I started 2 years ago coming to Finland to do business. And the interesting thing is, I want to just stop here and say, like, after that journey, the one thing that a good takeaway for everyone here is, I can't stress enough how important it is as an artist to actually understand business. Like, we're in a time where if you think about it, some of the conversations about like spending in culture and how to sort of prove that culture and art create economic growth, that's a really hard journey for any artist. That was also for me. Like, I never intended to create a business or be an international business person. To do what I wanted to do, I needed to speak the language of business, because that's the language that the world speaks today. So a good takeaway from this is, I don't know if you guys all follow or know of Alan Watts, British author and philosopher. He said something that really resonated with me, which was like, he says, listen very carefully, artists, is business means figuring out a way to get paid to play. And that really, really stuck with me, because that's the best way to look at business. And I think that led to like healthy investment. Right now, a bunch of artists in my company enjoy full-time jobs, stable positions. Some of them have kids, mortgages, normal lives. But most importantly, they get paid to play. And they're really good and really talented, and we nourish talent.
I think this is one of the key themes that I wanted to talk to you about even more. Mm-hmm. So, and by the way, your life story, I think that's your next film. If I think about this kind of art and business and how they are very often like polar opposites, although, you know, they are actually very much connected. And earlier on you mentioned this, you know, that your parents had kind of given you this image of, you know, if you go down the route of being an artist, you will starve, you know, this whole kind of image of the starving artist that we've all heard about at some point in our life. I completely agree that, you know, the starving artist is dead. And I have just a little kind of joke, but it's true. I myself have left Finland twice because I felt that my attitude and way of thinking, that, you know, art and commercial thinking can be can very much coexist, and they have to coexist. And I felt that there was no space for growth and films with bigger budgets and bigger IPs, and why can't it be done, and why can't we make films and TV series in English? So I completely resonate with what you're saying, and I just want to kind of boil this down to the life path that you've had. There has to be a kind of attitude behind that, and a way of thinking that has always guided you to be here today. Having experienced the 90-day Finn program, and you decided to stay, and with everything that's going on in the art world right now, you decided to do the opposite of what many artists have done, which is not to give up, not to be depressed. You decided to continue growing your company. So you've now started another company in Finland, and the way that your outlook towards life is completely opposite to what we hear in the news. And I'm very much the same with all the new initiatives that we have at Finnish Film Affair, which starts tomorrow. So we have an excellent program which is also supporting this ideology of commercial thinking and art. But how would you like, if you had to pinpoint, if you had to somehow put it into words, what is the ideology? What's the energy behind it? Or is it just passion? Is it something else? Mm-hmm. Is it the fact that you didn't go to film school, so you had to, start thinking commercially?
Okay, so the one word that comes to mind right now is resilience. Resilience is an important ingredient for artists. In fact, most artists we probably all admire. If you look into their life stories, they are all resilient, super resilient, especially the successful ones. But I must add one thing that I can observe from a different perspective coming from Mexico. In Mexico, there is some, I'm not going to be harsh on my country, but there is not that much art spending in Mexico. Nothing compared to here, even these days. For instance, I see the library you guys have here. It has for those of you musicians, it has a Pro Tools room and some guitars and instruments. If I would have grown up here, I would have spent my entire time in that library. I would have slept there, literally. And we don't have that in Mexico. So take it from an outsider. You guys are very lucky as a country to have the sort of resilience. And I can mention just briefly, I read a little bit about this, but you guys, since the Winter War, have a really good demonstration of a country going from extreme poverty with obviously all these war reparation repayments to Russia, all the way to prosperity now, to the happiest country in the world 6 times in a row, tech giant, amazing tech giant. So resilience is something that it's part of your culture, and you should just pursue it and try to capture it as an artist and try to get that resilience, because that's what keeps me going, to answer your question. And also obviously, and that sort of nurtures passion as well. But I want to touch a little bit about this. This is the most important takeaway that I get from Finland that I think you guys should pay attention, is learning from mistakes. If you think Babe Ruth, who scored the most home runs in baseball, he also had the most strikes. And the one thing I really like about working in Finland, and that's why I decided to set up a company in Finland, or a branch of my company in Finland, is because this is a place where mistakes are accepted. If you go to America, I hope I'm not offending anyone, but in America, if you fail once, you're done, you're out. In here, you can fail, and there's support from the government, and you can rethink your strategy and do it again and do it again and do it again. And this has proven extreme success in the tech world. And this is something I want to also, a big takeaway that I want to mention is, because obviously right now I have a partnership with a big tech person, Mikko, who did Supercell, which is one of the biggest tech companies here.
Remember, I have one question before we show your clip.
Okay, so quickly, the takeaway is, I know that most spending is focused on tech And that makes sense because tech gave you a lot of prosperity. But there's nothing that challenges tech more than art. I feel like art challenges tech and tech challenges the art. So if you invest in tech, you have to invest in art because art will inspire and challenge tech. And the more you do that, the more there's economic growth. So for instance, Mikko, and I want to end with this, I was talking to Mikko in Sauna recently, and he said to me, you know, I started as a 3D artist originally, and it was so hard as an artist to break into the industry. He wanted to be a 3D artist for films, and he couldn't break into the industry because it's hard, and then instead he decided to do video games to tell his stories through tech. And now that he enjoyed some success through Supercell, he's investing back into film. And I think that should happen with all successful tech people in here, and I think the event kind of supports that, but yeah.
Okay, one question, one sentence answer. Before we show your clip, and we will have to end this session. What should all artists or filmmakers, or both, what should they be doing right now?
Okay, one sentence is learning the language of business and collaborating with tech to challenge the tech. That's what I think all artists should be doing.
And going to Finnish Film Affair.
And going to Finnish Film Affair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kiitos. Yeah.
What are we seeing?
So these clips are we're going to watch. The first one shows the collaboration between Finland, UK, and Mexico, focused on art and technology. And this is Fireframe Studios, which is a national pride here, is a LED volume stage in Finland that allows films to be made with the game engine, super cost-effective and faster. So it's more like a clip to show the collaboration between tech and art. And the second clip we're going to watch is so you see what it looks like when a happy company and happy artists with stable jobs create economic growth.
Excellent.
Drop the fucking pill now. Drop the fucking pill now.
En la sierra me gusta respirar sus verdes montañas, a mi alma siempre hacen vibrar. Para el desierto respeto hay que mostrar, porque si tú lo cruzas como el mar, él te puede